Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Throne of Seal episode number 193 based on novel. So let's start. The golden light fog inside the Knight's holy mountain began to surge violently, and their drastic changes immediately shocked all the elders in this holy mountain. What surprised them even more was that the violently surging fog of light rose slowly into the sky and began to hover in a clockwise direction, and after a while, a huge golden whirlpool formed. The area within the Knight's holy mountain's reach was quite vast, and the golden whirlpool in the air was almost equal to this vast area. It was indeed very large. Even if one looked at it from the Night Temple at Ulongguan, one still could see this magical scene. The milky pillar of light rose from the core of the Knight's holy mountain, and then, in the divine atmosphere of majesty, the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation emerged out of thin air, blooming with the brilliance of its imperial weapon against the golden whirlpool. A huge throne appeared in the void, and the glittering white throne itself released magnificent 9 colors light. On the back of the throne, the subtle reliefs gave people an indescribable sense of beauty. At the top, there were the sun, the moon, and the stars, and the middle was the creatures of birds and animals, and what was attached to the throne was the scene of nature. A pair of throne's armrests were the sacred dragon statues and 12 winged angels. The circle of 9 colors glow released by the throne was so dazzling. Under the influence of its aura, the golden light mist became pure and transparent. Long Houchen's eyes shone with gold, and his hands pulled toward the void. A melodious crisp sound spread across thousands of miles, and the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation split in the air. It split into a 13 regiment of white glows that swooped down, straight into the Knight's holy mountain. In front of the eternal hero zombie, the scene that made the fire of his soul beat violently was the scene of 13 groups of white light successively landed on Long Houchen, which were the 13 eternal stars. The huge transparent gems on his chest, the magnificent 9 treasure crown on the top of his head, the glittering white mask with golden jewel eyes, the huge bibcock on his left shoulder, the 12 winged angels on his right shoulder, and the white supreme armor covered his whole body. When they all covered the body of Long Houchen, at that moment, the temperament of Long Houchen had undergone earth-shaking changes. In the whole cave, the cold aura was swept away, and only a touch of warmth pervaded it. It was at this time that powerful psychic waves awakened inside the cave. Pairs of eyes flickering with the fire of different colors slowly opened. The sealed divine throne of eternity and creation's aura awakened the eternal heroes who had given their lives for mankind. The zombie who had previously talked to Long Houchen was completely speechless at this time. His body was trembling out of control. When he looked at Long Houchen, the fire of his soul had been completely replaced by excitement. 13 regiments? 13 regiments? Yes, this really is the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation. God, you still care for us human beings after all. Finally, this day has come. I've waited so long. The day when someone win the recognition of the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation finally come. Shadows began to appear behind him, and the fire of the soul gradually turned from dazed to fiery. They obviously heard the words of the first eternal hero, but also saw with their own eyes the eternal armor of Long Houchen. A total of 63 souls of fire, all immersed in heat and excitement. Green, colorful, clear, and white. 3 light groups revolved around Long Houchen slowly. Long Houchen carried the sword of eternity behind him and embedded it between his huge wings. Due to the eternal armor, the aisle had become very narrow, and his figure had become much taller. In particular, his pair of wings touched the stone walls on both sides directly. Come in, son. Come on in. The zombie, the eternal hero who had communicated with Long Houchen earlier, waved eagerly to him. Long Houchen flashed into the cave. The cold aura inside the cave had been completely covered by the aura of the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation. When he entered the cave was completely illuminated. It was like the sun came into this dark world. Long Houchen saw the situation in the cave clearly. He felt his heart ache. In this cave that 63 eternal heroes were asleep, there were only 63 stone coffins. Apart from that, there was nothing else. The hollow and hidden aura in the cave was emitted from the ground, and although it had been suppressed by the aura of the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation, Long Houchen could still feel it. The heroes who had paid everything for mankind actually slept in such a place, and Long Houchen felt strangely angry. He did not speak, the lips behind the mask closed tightly. Looking at the zombies, the wings behind him slowly spread out. Gentlemen, my name is Long Houchen. On behalf of the Temple Federation, I've come to confess to all of you. As he spoke, wearing the eternal armor of the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation, he went so far as to get down on his knees and bow down to the 63 undead creatures in front of him. The glittering white eternal armor looked so sacred, and the eternal crown on his head was even more magnificent. And at this moment, he was bowing down to the 63 ancestors. This worship did not only represent himself, but for all mankind of the Union. Long Houchen's worship shocked all the eternal heroes. They looked at each other, and the heat in the fire of their souls gradually died down and was replaced by incomprehension and a slight emotion. The master of the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation even bowed down to them. He was. "Son, what are you doing? Get up," the first eternal hero zombie said hurriedly. He wanted to come forward to help him stand up, but he felt the divine majesty on the eternal armor, so he could only make an empty gesture after all. Long Houchen slowly raised his head, but he was still kneeling there. The mask on his face bounced up, and tears flashed in his eyes. "Ancestors and predecessors, you deserve my worship. All of you should be worshipped by all living humans of the Union. 6,000 years ago, you drove out the demons at the cost of your own lives. In order to protect the Union, you did not hesitate to become undead and slept silently in this cold crypt for 6,000 years. Although I don't know who made such a decision in the first place. But as the new federal president, I will never let this situation continue. You deserve much more than this." As he spoke, he bowed down again and kowtowed 3 times on the ground. Only then did the 63 eternal heroes understood what Long Houchen meant. For a moment, they all calmed down. A female voice sounded. "This child is so simple and cute. Didn't the man who gave you the key to enter here tell you that we stayed here voluntarily? And the layout here is also what we asked for." "Ah?" Long Houchen was stupefied as he looked up, and he immediately felt a smile from all the 63 eternal heroes. "Silly boy, get up." The eternal hero who was the first to talk to Long Houchen laughed. Although the muscles on his face would not move, the emotion of these eternal heroes could be clearly felt. Although Long Houchen made a silly mistake, he also moved these ancestors with his true feelings. Long Houchen just stood up and said awkwardly, "I thought. What did you think? Do you think we've been completely abandoned?" The previous female voice sounded again, and an eternal hero came out. When she walked out, others obviously made a way for her, and she must have had a high position among these eternal heroes. Although she had become a zombie, the beauty of this woman when she was alive still could be seen. Her face was not iron grey like most eternal heroes, but it was pale, extremely pale. Her skin appeared to be much more elastic, but her blood-red eyes looked very scary. This is not only a crypt at the foot of the Knight's Holy Mountain, but also above an ice spring. We have to make use of the cold here so that our bodies will not decay before they are soaked by spiritual power. There are small holes in each coffin that connected to the spring, giving off the cold. Otherwise, if you see us, we will not be a bunch of zombies, but a group of skeletons. As for other external objects, what is the use of it for us dead people? However, we later found that the coldness of this ice spring can also boost our strength and stabilize the fire of our souls, which is not easy to extinguish. That's what keeps us alive. Although we are still coming to an end, we have held on for a little longer. It was only then that Long Houchen understood the secret of this place. My name is Xu Yongxiao, and I am the leader of these 63 people. The last time someone came, it was 30 years ago. At that time, the little guy named Yan Haohan came here instead of the original master of the temple. Tell us what has happened outside in the past 30 years. At this time, the eternal heroes had gathered around Long Houchen, and most of them were already fond of this young man who had inherited the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation. Although Long Houchen's made a silly mistake, it could be recognized rather than excluded, and these newly awakened ancestors were naturally in a good mood. Long Houchen nodded and explained in as much detail as possible what he knew had happened to the Temple Alliance over the past 20 years. In particular, he gave a detailed account of the previous Holy War and the establishment of the new Temple Federation not long ago. During this period, Xu Yongxiao asked several questions, and Long Houchen answered them one by one. Only then did he know that although these ancestors were sleeping here, they still knew something about the major events that had happened on the mainland in the past 6,000 years. It was because every few decades, the master of the Night Temple, who controlled the Holy Mountain's order, would come here to bring them news from the outside. Well, what a Temple Federation! It's a success at last. It's a pity that we can't get out of here easily, otherwise I would have gone to trouble those little guys. To strengthen the alliance at the expense of self-interest. Finally, it's not too late for them to wake up. Xu Yongxiao was unexpectedly very supportive of the establishment of the new federation, and according to her, she seemed to have put forward similar opinions 30 years ago when Yang Haohan came here. At this time, an old man came to Xu Yongxiao and said to Long Haochen, "Son, you just said that there are now 6 sealed divine knights in the Night Temple, right?" Long Haochen nodded and said, "Yes, the Night Temple is full of talented men now, and it should be at its strongest level ever. 6 sealed divine thrones, including me, have their masters." "Good, that's great." The old man's emotion was obviously a little excited. At the beginning, I immediately sent Hong Yuan when I decided to concentrate the efforts of all mankind to create 5 sealed divine thrones. When one day mankind can fully control the 6 sealed divine thrones, it would be a good opportunity for us to counterattack the Devil's clan. It seems that God has treated us well. At a time when the fire of our souls is about to dissipate, it brings this good news to us. So that we can witness the human counteroffensive at the last minute, it is not in vain that we have been sleeping beneath the ground, waiting for 6,000 years. Xu Yongxiao introduced to Long Haochen, "This is Xiao Hua Xiao Lao." When the Temple Alliance was founded, he was the first master of the Night Temple, and he decided to create 5 sealed divine thrones. It can be said that he is the true ancestor of your Night Temple. Xiao is farsighted, and many of his original decisions have been fulfilled later. Long Haochen hurriedly and respectfully saluted. "Long Haochen here to pay respect to the ancestors." Xiao Hua said in a deep voice, "Son, I want to hear about you growing up. I witnessed with my own eyes the power of the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation, and I witnessed it come to earth. At that time, I said that the existence of this imperial weapon means that God has not abandoned us as human beings. However, I have always been unable to figure out what kind of strong person can be recognized by it. I even thought that its existence has more symbolic meaning than practical significance. Unexpectedly, one day a knight was able to become its master. I am very curious about your growing experience, and also curious about the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation's recognition process." Up to now, Long Haochen had not yet proposed to invite these eternal heroes to come out of the mountain. These were the real heroes of mankind and the ancestors of the 6 temples. Yang Haohan told him before he came, "We must first get the recognition of these eternal heroes before asking them to come out of the mountain. They had been sleeping here for 6,000 years, and no one knew what they think of coming out of the mountain. At the same time they could be very moody and even impersonal." From Yang Haohan's words, Long Haochen realized that the masters of the Night Temple had suffered losses in front of these eternal heroes before. Yang Haohan did not say the details, but he always faced these ancestors with caution. Until now, he did not feel that there was anything wrong with these eternal heroes. In fact, what he didn't know was that his attitude played a big role. He was different from the masters of the Night's Temple who came here before. If they could become the sealed divine knight of the Night Temple and had control of the Holy Mountains Order, they had to be at least over 50 or 60 years old. Moreover, in the process of growing up, the authority also grew, which naturally produced the temperament and mentality of the superior. When they came here, they listened to the eternal heroes and shouted, sometimes even reprimanding them impolitely. There would be some rejection in their hearts. No matter how respectful the attitude was, there was no time like Long Haochen that set his posture so low. Long Haochen was different. He was already young and only in his 20s. Although he was already in charge of the Temple Union, he did not have much desire for power. Nor did he give orders. And then there was his heartfelt admiration for these eternal heroes. Therefore, the sincerity in attitude could be said to surpass all the chivalry temple masters who had come here in the past. Naturally, these eternal heroes were very fond of him. Yes. Respectfully agreed, Long Haochen began to talk about the process of him growing up. He said in great detail how his father began to teach him, how he improved his strength step by step, how he became a hunter, which led to the Light Dawn Demon Hunter group that built meritorious deeds step by step, and to make continuous breakthroughs in strength under many kinds of opportunities. Even the secret of the Tower of Eternity was not hidden and was fully told. When he said that he died in battle and Kia brought him back to life in the Tower of Eternity, these eternal heroes who had lived for more than 6,000 years was moved. Especially when they heard the story of Electrolux, the feeling was much greater than that of the people who saw the images in the Union. After all, the age in which they once lived was very close to the Electrolux's era. Hearing with their own ears how Electrolux became the process and cause of the natural disaster of the undead, how could these ancestors not feel sorry for it? Long Haochen also made no secret of the process that the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation recognized him. He described the process in great detail. He described how he turned defeat into victory, especially the battle to break through the eternal angel. Son of Light? What a son of light! My old bones haven't moved for a long time. Young man, how about a little practice with me? What Long Houchen did not expect was that when he had finished telling the whole story, Xiao Hua unexpectedly offered to have a round with him. Long Houchen subconsciously thought that this was a test for him by his predecessors, and therefore he did not flinch. After respectfully saluting Xiao Hua, he said, "Please." Other eternal heroes slowly retreated to make room for Long Houchen and Xiao Hua. Although the layout of the cave was simple, it was quite large in area, at least 1/3 in size Holy League trial ground. This area was certainly not enough for someone as strong as Long Houchen and Xiao Hua. However, since they were only playing with each other, they would naturally limit their strength, so they would not destroy the place. Long Houchen did not pull out his sword of eternity behind his back, and his hands were on the left and right side of his body, each condensing a huge golden sword, which was almost the same size as the sword of eternity. Watching the young man's kind behavior, the eternal heroes who watched the game could not help but nodded. Xiao Hua's figure was very tall, but also appeared to be very stiff. When he and Long Houchen faced, Long Houchen immediately felt as if he was under big pressure. Is this pressure from the soul? Long Houchen was greatly surprised. His spiritual power had been enhanced to an extremely powerful level after the fusion of sealed divine throne of eternity and creation with Yi Xiaolei. Even if he couldn't compete with the god of devils, he was definitely the first human being to reach this level. However, when facing Xiao Hua, his mental strength did not have the upper hand, but instead it was suppressed. However, Long Houchen was still Long Houchen after all. After a brief surprise, he had understood. The power of the soul of Xiao Hua was not necessarily stronger than that of him, but the purity of the fire of his soul left no impurities in his soul, and the power of the soul was the core strength of the undead. That was what puts him at a sensory disadvantage. However, Xiao Hua couldn't do any harm to him with the power of his soul alone. At this time, Xiao Hua's dim eyes suddenly lit up like two sudden clusters of starlight. It was clear and bright gold. Long Houchen was shocked to find that in terms of purity of light attribute, this Night Temple's ancestor was not inferior to him in any ways. What shocked him even more was that while Xiao Hua's eyes lit up, there was also a mass of golden light on his chest, and the color of the golden light was even brighter. Then a golden liquid flowed out from his chest and quickly covered his whole body. This was... The golden liquid was thick and bright, and where the golden color passed, all the aura of the undead was completely covered up. The pure and powerful aura of light burst out from him like a blowout, and under the action of the golden liquid, Xiao Hua emitted a faint golden mist all over his body. Liquid psychic power release? Long Houchen did not know what practice level it would take to be able to use this power, but he knew that he could not do it with his current practice level of level 9 of rank 5. He could instantly shape his spiritual power in vitro, and condense it into armor, just like the two swords inside his hands. However, such a liquid flow, he could never do. Even if it was a simulation, he never felt so real. The golden liquid soon flowed all over Xiao Hua's body, and he instantly became a golden man. Then, the liquid began to have a shaping effect. A simple and unadorned golden armor wrapped around Xiao Hua. Fine gold-based armor. Long Houchen suddenly understood why he had such a strong sense of familiarity when he looked at the armor, because Xiao Hua's armor condensed by himself with liquid psychic power which had many similarities with the fine gold-based armor. There was no doubt that the existence of the fine gold-based armor might have had something to do with this ancestor. Liquid flow, the same two golden swords appeared in Xiao Hua's hands. Compared with the two swords condensed by the spiritual power of Long Houchen, Xiao Hua's double swords were dark and golden, and the aura was completely introverted. At the same time, even the bright aura released from his body was completely out of sight, as if it was only a body of metal armor which had nothing to do with spiritual power. However, Long Houchen clearly felt that Xiao Hua had become more frightening. He even felt a little bit like when he faced the god of devils for the first time. The power of this ancestor seemed to be higher than that of the Knight of Judgment. You have to give it the best you've got. Xiao Hua's voice sounded in Long Houchen's ear, and then he started to move. Although he was an ancestor, he did not intend to be modest. A flash of golden light appeared and the two swords in his hands uniformly cross-chopped. The dark golden light crossed in front of Long Houchen almost instantly. Long Houchen was so experienced in combat that he reacted immediately the moment Xiao Hua's body moved. His left foot retreated half a step, while the sword in his right hand chopped forward. Xiao Hua sent out the cross-chopping as if it had been sent right in front of Long Houchen. Long Haochen's sword also chopped in the core position of Xiao Hua's cross-chopping. The golden light as bright as the scorching sun blossomed on the sword of Long Haochen's right hand. It was a knight's level for skill, the bright sun's behead. When the golden light converged in the sky, Long Haochen did not retreat, and while the cross was broken, the sword in his left hand had also been pierced out, and his original demon flash was put out with a shot. Thousands of sword shadows vibrated at a special frequency like a golden fog of light towards Xiao Hua. There was no harsh sound, each sword was just like a ray of light. Among the eternal heroes who watched the game, many people nodded secretly. From Long Haochen's flowing movements and this self-created skill, they could feel the excellency of this young man. His achievements were supported by his own great strength. Xiao Hua's movement seemed to be a little slow. In the face of the demon flash, he seemed to be unable to dodge. The double swords in his hands, which had just finished the cross-chopping, made a strange posture in front of him. Not soon after he had finished his sword posture, the demon flash reached him. Although Long Haochen did not have a powerful weapon in his hand, the demon flash was his combination of lightning thorns and original ripples of light. It was a powerful attack when driven by a level 9 practice level user. However, all the golden light disappeared quietly when it was 1 foot in front of Xiao Hua's body, and even the slightest ripple did not splash. It was ineffective. What surprised Long Haochen the most was that he found that his attack didn't even touch his opponent. What kind of power is this? A domain? When thinking of the word domain, Long Haochen's own light god domain was subconsciously released. The soft golden light instantly enveloped the battlefield where he and Xiao Hua were in. By the recent series of high-intensity battles, Long Haochen had become more able to control his light god domain. His power in the light god domain was undiminished, but it did not affect the other eternal heroes around him at all. The light god domain could be said to be the nemesis of all light attribute domains. In Long Haochen's perspective, the display of his own domain along with the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation should made him gain the upper hand anyway. At least he could force Xiao Hua to use some powerful strikes before it was possible to turn the situation around. However, he was wrong. When the light god domain and Xiao Hua's body collided together, Long Haochen almost exclaimed because his domain had failed. The light god domain had completely lost its effect in front of Xiao Hua. Seeing the golden light flowing, Xiao Hua stood firm like a solid boulder in the torrent. On the other hand, the power of the light domain of Long Haochen slid along both sides of his body like a wave of water. It was at this time that Xiao Hua, who made a strange posture, released his second attack. What Long Haochen saw was a huge golden eye, and when Xiao Hua launched the attack, he completely disappeared. Then an irresistible force came close to him. For a moment, Long Haochen only felt his body trembling violently out of control. Countless golden lights shone on the eternal armor. Every bit of gold brought him a slight tingling. The light covered almost every inch of his body. However, he had no way to resist. Between the swings of his swords and how his spiritual powers burst out, they had no effect on the golden eye at all. It was as if his psychic powers and his own abilities had completely failed at this moment. Boom! Long Haochen's body flew far away, as if it was bombarded by the eyes of the golden eye. He hit the stone wall at the distance and then slowly slid down to the ground. The golden eye disappeared, but Xiao Hua reappeared there. He was still in the appearance of a golden armor with a faint of golden fog on his swords. Is that all you can do? And you plan to fight the god of devils at this level? Xiao Hua's voice was very insipid, there were not many mood swings. However, Long Haochen's face blushed with shame. The blow just now did not do him any harm, for the impact of the thousands of golden rays falling on him was not that strong. Coupled with the strong defense of eternal armor, he was just blown away. However, even though Long Haochen's body was not hurt, his heart was badly stung. Since he gained the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation, and the evolution of Hao Yu, he felt that he had the ability to compete with the god of devils. This was why he confidently presided over the Federal Council and wanted to fight with the god of devils. However, from this fight, it was like a slap in his face, so that he is awakened from self-confidence. He had no idea how he lost. He also didn't understand why the double swords in his hands, as well as his spiritual power and the light god domain, all had lost their effect. Does it mean that the ancestors on the other side are immune to the ability of the light system? Long Haochen slowly got up from the ground, looked at Xiao Hua who was standing there, took a deep breath, and tried to pull himself together. Then he slowly raised the two swords and respectfully said, "Please give me advice. Get up from where one falls. Only in battle can one really feel the cause of defeat. Tenacity occupied a large part of his character, and although he was easily defeated by Xiao Hua, his heart was not discouraged, but became vigilant. There was no doubt that the god of devils must be more powerful than the ancestors in front of him. If he couldn't even resist the attack of this ancestor, how much chance would he have to win in the face with the god of devils? What was the problem? Only he could find it himself. He didn't even think about using the power of Hao Yu here. Hao Yu was powerful, but if he was not strong, how could he cooperate with Hao Yu and compete with the god of devils? Xiao Hua did not say a word, but slowly raised the two swords in his hand and made his previous posture again, and there was still no aura of light on his body. This time, Long Haochen directly mobilized the light god domain, and the rich light elements gradually showed 9 colors of golden light around his body, which was the effect shown by the combination of the domain of eternity and the light god domain. After the combination of the clear white domain of eternity and the clear golden light god domain, the 9 colors became illusory, and the golden color was mixed with the eternal white. The aura seemed to have converged and was no longer so strong, but the eternal heroes watching the game clearly felt a huge pressure coming from Long Haochen. The weaker eternal heroes retreated a little further. On the other hand, there was a strange light twinkling in Xiao Hua's beaming red eyes, and he was obviously interested in the changes of Long Haochen's domain. The 9-color golden light revolved rapidly around Long Haochen's body, and he directly used his own domain skills, the light waltz. After a short period of thinking, Long Haochen understood that the reason for his failure was because of the domain failure. He didn't know why the domain failed, but he must find out the reason, otherwise, he would still be unable to resist the attack of Xiao Hua. So, this time, he raised the power of his domain to the extreme and aroused the domain of eternity to blend with the power of sealed divine throne of eternity and creation in order to explore the mysteries of each domain through a more powerful domain. Long Haochen's movement was very slow. He urged the light waltz to slowly approach Xiao Hua. The reasons he slowed down were because it was better to see the movement of the opponent and also to give Xiao Hua enough reaction time. He didn't want to hurt this ancestor. However, Xiao Hua stood there still motionless, still maintaining that strange posture. His posture looked very simple, with his left leg standing still, his right leg half a step forward, his toes pointed and his knees bent. The left sword was in front of his lower abdomen, the right sword in front of his chest, and both swords were held by the tip of the sword with his outer fingers. Light waltz was getting closer and closer, and the power of domain was far from being comparable in the release of domain, not to mention the fact that this time Long Haochen's domain had almost multiplied. Long Haochen had opened his perception to the greatest extent, and he could clearly feel even the slightest change in spiritual power. Light waltz had arrived in front of Xiao Hua. At the moment when the two sides were about to touch, Long Haochen captured a strange change. Xiao Hua's figure suddenly became illusory, as if his body trembled for a moment at a strange frequency like the ripples of light. The next moment, the light wall spread slowly to both sides about a foot in front of him. However, this time it did not slip completely, but blocked Xiao Hua's body. Before the joy appeared in Long Haochen's heart, Xiao Hua started again. His figure disappeared in an instant and the golden eye appeared again, but this time the golden eye appeared directly above his light walls. An indescribable force pressed the core of the light walls and directly suppressed the power of his domain. Then, the huge golden eye opened. The situation was exactly the same as before, and this time the blow was even harder. With a harsh sound of the collision, Long Haochen's body flew upside down again, hitting the wall of the cave. Even the location he fell down was exactly the same as before. The body slipped slowly, but Long Haochen did not stand up immediately after falling to the ground. He sat there motionless. Xiao Hua was also silent and stood there so quietly after falling to the ground, with his two swords in his hand in the same position as before. The eyes of eternal heroes all looked at Long Haochen, and they were used to loneliness. To wait for such a short time was nothing. It was the core legal array of the Knight's Holy Mountain. Kia whispered to Yang Haohan, "Grandpa Yang, how come there is no news from Haochen? Just now he triggered the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation. Will something happen with the ancestors?" Yang Haohan smiled and said, "Don't worry. Haochen holds the Holy Mountain's order. No matter what, the ancestors will not do anything to him. As for the release of the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation just now, it may be the ancestors' curiosity about this sealed divine throne. After all, this is the first time that we humans have been able to mobilize the power of this sealed divine throne. If I were them, I would also like to see with my own eyes what this sealed divine throne looks like. Don't worry, and just wait patiently. Don't you believe in Haochen's ability?" Kia nodded, smiled, and said, "I'm just worried about him too much. As she spoke, she simply sat down and contemplated. At the same time, she also tried to feel all the spiritual changes around her through a more concentrated contemplation practice. A quarter of an hour had passed since Long Houchen sat silently in the depths of the cave, and the whole cave was extremely quiet. Had it not been for the eternal armor of Long Houchen and the sparkling liquid of Xiaohua's fine golden-based armor, the cave would look the same as before. Suddenly, without any warning, Long Houchen jumped up from the ground. "Ancestor, I understand now." Xiaohua's eyes twinkled with gold, and said with his calm voice, "What do you understand?" Long Houchen said, "It's the domain. You used the strength of the domain to break my domain. It's not that my domain is too weak, but because you made your domain stronger." Xiaohua was covered with armor at this time, coupled with the fact that he was a zombie, there could not be any change in his appearance. It's useless to say it out loud. "Do you want to try again?" Long Houchen said, "I want to try. Please, my ancestor." As he spoke, he picked up his swords again, looked at Xiaohua, and took a deep breath. The light god domain was slowly released from him, but the process of release was slow, and this time Long Houchen no longer relied on the power of the domain of eternity from the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation anymore. He simply released the domain of the light god. A clear golden domain gradually turned into 7 colors, and then it was kept within 1 foot from Long Houchen's body. On Long Houchen's chest, a mass of blue light mixed with gold began to appear. Every eternal heroes around heard his heartbeat clearly. The colorful golden light god domain began to feel foggy, and then it became illusory, and the extent to which it emitted from Long Houchen's body became thinner and thinner, as if it was gradually compressing to Long Houchen's body. The eternal armor had gradually turned into colorful golden color under the rendering of the light god domain, and the illusory feeling had begun to become more and more intense. After 2 confrontations with Xiaohua, Long Houchen finally understood by the virtue of his strong insight after a careful observation. At the same time, he also understood that Xiaohua not only wanted to test his strength, but also to teach him some of his thousands of years of combat experience. Why can Xiaohua not be limited by the light attributes of the light god domain, and even invalidate the power of his domain? After 2 failures, Long Houchen gradually knew the reason. The reason was that the domain for me. Level 9 of rank 5 was the right time to be able to apply this. Xiaohua was teaching him how to really use the domain for me. The domain for me did not only let the domain and its user integrated better, but also made them become one after the integration. Xiaohua's domain level was certainly not as good as Long Houchen's light god domain, but it was by virtue of the perfect integration between himself and the domain that he turned the domain into a body and the body into a domain, which made up for the gap between the 2 sides at the level of the domain. In addition, he completely introverted the domain in his body. Long Houchen's domain was strong, but the coverage was also hit. In the process of collision, there would naturally be scattered. While Xiaohua's domain could be said to be extremely concentrated and smelted, it was completely suppressed in that range of the contact surface, even though Long Houchen's domain was dominant in the collision. That was why there was a failure in similar areas. The truth was that within the range of contact between the light god domain and Xiaohua, the light god domain was completely suppressed and excluded. In the second competition, Long Houchen mobilized the domain of eternity for integration, and launched a light waltz inside the domain, which greatly enhanced the intensity of his domain. This time, even if the Xiaohua domain had exerted its ability, the domain for me, to the extreme, it was no longer possible to create the effect to defeat Long Houchen's domain like before. However, Light Waltz was still unable to suppress him. With the perfect domain for me, he calmly broke away from the attack of Long Houchen's domain and blew Long Houchen far away again. At this time, Long Houchen was in the state of raw simulation of Xiaohua. Although Xiaohua looked calm, he was secretly admiring Long Houchen. Long Houchen's talent was so good that he could understand what he wanted to teach him in such a short time. This quick understanding could be said to be the only one he had ever seen in his life. What made him a little jealous was that Long Houchen even had the protection from the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation. It was actually very dangerous to really complete the integration of the domain for me. If it was not good enough, one would get hurt by the domain, or destroy the structure of the domain. In severe cases, it might even lead to a decline in practice level. However, Long Houchen had the protection from the sealed divine throne of eternity and creation, so there was no need to consider these issues at all. All he had to do was to try and integrate them. There was no need to be afraid of being attacked by the domain at all. This way, his integration process should be much easier than that of Xiaohua. This video will end here.